There are 30 playable civs in Civilization VII's base game, 31 if you include Shawnee. The first stage, Antiquity, was the very first one to be fully revealed, and now the largest age by civs, the Exploration Age, has also been fully unveiled. Let's evaluate the 11 civs here and consider who the powerhouse players may be. Your early guide to the Exploration Age starts now. We begin with Songhai, who was actually just announced, the final civilization for the Exploration Age. Songhai is an interesting blend of a few different features, most of them though boil down to rivers and trade. First and foremost, the unique ability. Increase resource capacity in cities that are built along navigable rivers. And your trade ships that are sailing down those rivers cannot be plundered. You are completely safe from piracy while you're playing as Songhai. If we delve a little deeper, while we'll leave traditions and many civic trees associated wonders out of this video, you can see their unique infrastructure provides gold, and again likes rivers. They have a unique merchant unit that gains gold when you create a trade route that has at least one navigable river along it, and finally, their unique military unit is kind of the pirate itself, allowing you to go out, plunder some more, receiving additional yields when you plunder trade routes. Obviously, the associated leader here is Amina, who also leans into that resource focus, that money-hungry, maybe plundering focus. Second up, we have Shawnee, the one we know probably the most about, and one of the first to be announced and revealed with that full gameplay live stream. Important to note that you'll need to pre-order the game or buy one of the more deluxe editions to have access to them. They are quite special in that regard, the only one out of 31 that does require an extra step, an extra sort of paywall, if you will. Now, what do they actually do? Well, again, there's a love of rivers. Interestingly, we're yet to see a lot of religion, although we have seen a bit of trade. Their settlements built adjacent to navigable rivers get extra food. However, if they're not, you'll receive a minus 10% penalty, and that's a percentage-based penalty. So it's fairly harsh potentially later in the game. Also important to note, their unique unit is a missionary, so there's that religious element coming through, and their unique military unit is an infantry unit that gives you extra combat strength for every empire resource. Important to note, not all resources are empire resources, only some of them that affect, of course, your entire empire. And they're blessed to have their own leader in the game. Not all civs get it, but they do. Tecumseh is a natural fit here. Third on our list, Chola India. India, by the way, if you're watching, not many Indians watch my channel, but if you are, you're very lucky. You've got 3 civilizations in the base game at launch, 3 out of 30. 10% of civs are Indian civs in Civilization 7 at launch within that base game. So, what does Chola do? Potentially the second piece of the Indian puzzle. Your unique ability gains you an additional trade route from trade agreements. So there's that diplomatic element here. Get a trade agreement, secure an agreement with another player, and gain an additional trade route as a result. The unique infrastructure is quite neat. It's, in fact, the first one that we're going to look at that has a unique quarter. What does that mean? Well, if you build both unique buildings on one tile, you'll get this effect. Increased land trade route and water trade route range. So it will be worthwhile delving into your civic tree potentially, unlocking these buildings as fast as you can, generally faster than the tech tree, to get that benefit. Your unique naval commander is quite neat, debuffing enemy naval units, reducing their strength, and your unique naval unit has an extra attack per turn, if your movement allows. My goodness, that is an aggressive build for a naval military inside of this Indian civilization. I think I like that a lot. And their base units, happiness, gold, may also be helpful here. Finally, of course, not only will you get 3 civilizations, but you also get effectively 2 different leaders. If you're interested in playing as India, choose your persona, it's entirely up to you. They're both reasonable fits, generally focusing in on happiness, relating back to at least one of our unique buildings. Wow, what a build for India. Let's move through to the Normans, potentially Building upon a Roman game from the Antiquity Age, the Normans give us this ability. Land units have increased movement when embarked, and when they're adjacent to the coastline, they'll receive extra strength. So, obviously, a pretty strong focus on naval gameplay here. Is it enough to beat India though? Well, I don't know. Let's have a look at what their unique infrastructure, civilian and military units offer, starting with the infrastructure. Here again we see a unique quarter, which provides a unique unit when it's completed. What do you need to do to complete it? Build the 2 buildings within it. The first one gains happiness, if it's placed on rough terrain. The second gives you culture when it's adjacent to walls and counts as a fort. And walls are a continuing theme, of course, for the Normans here. Finally, if we focus in on the units, their settler, when it builds a town, which they all do by default, except for your first city of course, receives a wall. So free walls in future towns and cities. Their cavalry unit has increased combat strength against units that are slower than it, so you can kind of chase them down in a Mongol style. Though, of course, we'll get to the Mongols a little bit later on. Here there is a fairly natural pairing for a leader. The Machiavellian kind, of course, and one also, a pretty minor detail, but I wanted to mention it. If you're playing as the Normans, you'll have a starting bias not just for coast, but also for iron, a resource-based, fairly rare starting bias in Civ 7. Next up, we have the colonial power that is Spain, inside of the exploration age. We don't see Portugal, interestingly. We also don't see the Dutch, arguably, although I won't get too into history here because the YouTube comment sections will flame me, the creators of the corporation. Nonetheless, let's see what Spain have to offer. Increased gold efficiency towards converting a town to a city. Decreased further, or increased further I should say, in distant lands. What does that mean? Converting your towns to cities is cheaper, especially if it's not on the continent where you started. And distant lands is of course a big focus for Spanish gameplay, as you can see by their unique infrastructure, where again we have that quarter bonus, this time with buildings that provide culture, gold, and some adjacency, though they cannot be built in distant lands. A sort of anti-synergy perhaps with the broader appeal of Spain. Here you see their unique civilian unit, the first that we'll look at in this video that is indeed a great person. You can build it as many times as you want, these great people, but you'll only get each version of it, the first one being Ferdinand, activated on a fleet commander in distant lands to receive extra movement in sight, once. You'll only get each of these individual great people once, and the cost of building them will increase, each conquistador increasing in cost every time. Your military unit is a unique infantry. Adjacent units receive increased combat strength against cavalry, so maybe this is the anti-Mongol, anti-Norman civ you've been after. And if you want to play as Spain, of course, you may remember just a couple of weeks ago, Isabella was announced. Kind of harping back to that Civ 5 focus with loads of gold from natural wonders and double the tile yields, though not quite as fixed as Civ 5's was. A little bit more flexible. Speaking of flexible, let's move through to the Mongols. It's Mongolia, which of course makes its triumphant return in yet another civilization game. The unique ability here, when you capture a settlement, you get the strongest cavalry unit you've currently unlocked, you can currently train. But your settlers are more difficult to produce. Reduced production. Obviously the incentive here is to make lots of cavalry and go and take cities for yourself. And if you're working towards that victory condition in the Second Age, thankfully as the Mongols, you can conquer settlements on your homelands, not just distant land settlements, which will be the case for literally every other civ. So there's a little advantage there. Your unique infrastructure provides gold, and when one of your units moves across it, they'll get their movement back. Its movement is restored. Your unique commander also has increased movement and helps cavalry units. And your unique military unit is ranged, counts as a cavalry, and heals after defeating enemies. Can you see the picture I'm building here? It's one that's fast. It's one that loves horses, loves gold, and loves taking cities, no matter where they are in the map. Next up, we have Abbasid, who I couldn't find a color scheme for, so I went with the Age of Empires 4 one, which is why it's just different shades of black. The unique ability receives gold for each rural population, non-urban districts, right? So your your farms at the hinterland, or whatever they might be, when you create a specialist, specialists would probably be added to urban tiles. So there's kind of a buff there. This one, they note, scales with game speed. One of the first effects we've seen to explicitly mention that. Makes me think that most of them probably don't. Otherwise, they'd either all mention it or none of them would. The unique infrastructure is again a unique quarter, adding science to all specialists within the city. The buildings provide both science and happiness base, as well as allowing you to unlock a religion. Neat. The civilian unit is a great person yet again, and you know what that means, ladies and gentlemen. It means a whole load of different dudes that you can build just once, and their cost increases each time. This time around, they can do things like create a hospital, and the hospital receives added food. Or a happiness building, any old one, and you increase the happiness to your city. Finally, quite a neat one, activate on a navigable river down the bottom there to receive influence for every tile on the river, again, scaled by game speed. Their unique cavalry unit is kind of interesting. When stationed in or occupying a settlement, it receives increased combat strength for every urban pop. Jingle Jam update! Thank you to everybody who supported this year's charity fundraiser. The first year I've been a part of it. As a reminder, if you donate 35 quid or more, you can get all of these games for free while keys last. There's only 100,000. They're probably about halfway gone. Thank you, Game of Physics. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Awesome, Eric Noir, and all the anonymous donors who have supported us so far. We're about halfway there and only one day in. Let's get back to the video. Links down below if you'd like to donate any amount to support charity this holiday season. Next up, it's Ming China. China is another modern-day nation-state that receives multiple civilizations in the base game of Civ 7. So far, we've had one revealed in Antiquity, as well as here in the Exploration Age. I wonder if we'll see one in the Modern Age too. Will they pull off the Indian 10%? Time will tell. Yongle makes a slight Easter egg mention here, with the Great Cannon of Yongle being their unique ability. Increase science in the capital. However, you'll receive reduced science per turn for each social policy slotted. So there's a really interesting move here, right? Loads of science, but you probably don't want loads of culture as Ming China. Interesting. Their Great Wall is here, and it counts as a fort. You'll make extra money the more you build, and of course you have to build them in a line, obviously. Their unique civilian unit is a merchant, large amount of gold when you use the Create Road action. The first mention of a Create Road action I think that we've seen so far in the Civ guides. Finally, their unique military unit is an infantry. Cool. Increased combat strength in featureless terrain, so if you're walking around somewhere really boring, you'll be extra strong. Interestingly though, as an infantry, it has a ranged attack. Will it be as good as those double-hitting crossbows from previous games? Previous era, maybe even in this game, I don't know. Overall, their leader is, of course, also innately fused into the game, potentially, with Confucius making a reappearance probably from the ancient era, and he is great. Next up, the Inca. King of the Hill, as I described the civilization when they were first announced. Why? Well, because mountain tiles can be worked, and you'll gain additional food and production on mountains. But really, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Though it's important to note, that is pretty unique. Mountains will generally be fairly useless for most civs, right? This is really one of your only chances to get something out of them, and boy can you what with that wonderful terrace farm, gaining what they call a quote-unquote high yield of food. Maybe more than flatlands, who knows? But it can only be built on a rough tile adjacent to a mountain. Their unique Scout, interestingly in the Second Age, can see straight through a mountain, laser beam vision, straight through that rock, and their unique ranged unit has high movement, ignores rough penalties, and has increased combat strength on them. Obviously, they are mountain lovers. Who's perhaps not one is Majapahit. Majapahit? Modern day Indonesia, perhaps, is a slightly easier way for a noob like me to put it. Their unique ability gives all cities, except your starting one or your newly founded capital, an increased specialist limit. Though they explicitly mention here that after you leave the age, the limit goes away. Most Civ abilities will go away after you leave the age because you'll change Civ. I don't think that's explicitly unusual, but it could, I guess, catch players off guard maybe. oh, my specialists are gone now that I've changed in age, is maybe what they're trying to front run. They have a unique quarter, which is built together with buildings providing a whole load of happiness. And when you do that, you'll get a relic. And that will help you, of course, toward one of the victory conditions, the cultural victory condition. Likewise, their unique missionary will help with that too, receiving culture when you convert a settlement to your religion. And if you need to get across the seas to do that, thankfully you'll have a naval unit that has better strength against other naval units. And finally, I can't believe we've already made it to the end. Number 11, Hawaii. Hawaii, the kind of Polynesia take from a previous Civ game, if you will, in Civilization 7 gives you culture each time your settlement expands out to a marine tile. Every time you get a marine tile, you'll get some culture. The culture bomb is back. Increased happiness as well on fishing boats. Yep, cool. Just another synergy with the ocean, I suppose. If we take a look at their uniques, their unique improvement provides food and production. Adjacent farms receive increased culture but must be placed on grassland. They also have a unique missionary. It has a heal that doesn't delete the unit. And finally, their unique infantry has increased combat strength against other infantry and cavalry. So probably good against everything except a ranged unit or a boat, right? Land-based conquest, so long as they don't shoot at you from afar. Thank you for joining me for this fairly whirlwind look at all of the civilizations, all 11 available in the Exploration Age. There are no more to be announced, so that's all we've got. Cheers for being here. I'll see you next time.